March 24th, 1945. 22,000 feet above Germany. Franz Stigler stared at the fuel gauge. Empty. The needle hadn't moved in 2 minutes. His Messerschmitt Bf-109 was running on fumes, and beneath him stretched 50 miles of enemy territory. The engine coughed once, twice, then fell silent. No roar, no thrust, just the whistle of wind and the sickening pull of gravity. Franz's hands trembled. Not from the brutal cold, though frost was forming inside his cockpit. He shook because he knew what came next. The stories were clear. American pilots didn't just shoot you down. They circled your parachute, waited until you were defenseless, then finished what they'd started. His commanders had been explicit. The Americans are animals. Better to go down with your aircraft than surrender. Below, German farmland grew larger. Each village crawled with Allied troops, tanks, anti-aircraft guns. If he bailed out and survived the landing, capture meant interrogation, prison, maybe worse. His mind flashed to his mother and younger sister in Bavaria. If he didn't make it, they'd receive a telegram, missing in action, no details, no closure. Then movement in his mirror, 2 silver shapes, fast, closing. P-51 Mustangs. American fighters, the best in the sky. Franz's stomach dropped. They'd spotted him. He didn't reach for his trigger. There was no point. He was defenseless, a gliding coffin. He braced himself, hoping it would be quick. But it didn't come. Instead, one Mustang pulled up beside him, impossibly close, barely 50 feet off his wingtip. Franz turned his head. Through the canopy, he saw the pilot clearly. American, young, maybe his age. The pilot looked straight at him. No hate, no finger on the trigger, just watching. Then the American did something Franz couldn't process. He pointed downward. Not in anger, not to intimidate, more like a gesture of direction, of help. Here's the question that will haunt Franz Stigler for the rest of his life. When you have every right to destroy your enemy, when war itself demands it, what makes a man choose mercy instead? If you were in that cockpit, on either side, what would you do? Leave your answer in the comments. The Bf-109 continued dropping. 18,000 feet. The lead Mustang pointed again, more firmly this time, toward an airfield in the distance. Then another gesture. Palms down, slow push. Land. Franz couldn't believe it. These Americans were guiding him down. He hadn't trained for this. No one had. The propaganda hadn't mentioned compassion. At 15,000 feet the airfield loomed, American-controlled, captured from the Luftwaffe months ago. He knew what waited if he landed. Prison, interrogation, everything he'd been told to fear. But his engine was gone. His options were gone. 10,000 feet. The Mustangs still flanked him. No shots, no threats, just silent escorts. 8,000. 5,000. At 3,000 feet, the lead Mustang rocked its wings, a signal, then peeled off, climbing back into the sky. The second followed. They left him alone with the runway. Somehow, they had given him a chance. Franz lowered the landing gear manually. No hydraulics left. The landing would be hard. But he was alive. And someone, somewhere, had chosen mercy. The Messerschmitt slammed onto the American runway, bouncing once before skidding to a stop. Silence followed, thick and unreal. Then jeeps raced toward him. This was it, the moment he'd dreaded. He considered drawing his sidearm, a final act, but thought of those Mustangs, of the pilot who had given him the gift of landing. He raised his hands slowly. The canopy creaked open. The first American to reach him was a sergeant, sidearm drawn but not aimed. "Out!" the man barked, then in broken German, "Raus! Langsam!" Franz obeyed, legs trembling. He expected shouting, shoving, a rifle to the back. Instead, the sergeant reached out, steadying him. "Easy there, buddy. You okay? Verletzt?" The question stunned him. Was this man checking if he was injured with genuine concern? "9," Franz managed. "Not injured." The sergeant nodded. "Good. Come on." He was led to a jeep. Not dragged, not shoved, just led. One soldier sat beside him, another across. No one pointed a weapon, no one struck him. The vehicle smelled of cigarettes and coffee. The soldier next to him offered a canteen. Franz hesitated, then drank. Cold, clean. He whispered, "Danke." The soldier smiled. "You're welcome, pal." At the operations building, an officer awaited, Captain James Mitchell, mid-40s, glasses, polite. "Sit, please," he said in perfect German. On the desk sat coffee and 2 cubes of real sugar. "Would you like some?" Mitchell asked, already pouring. Franz could only nod. The warmth of the mug seared his fingertips. The aroma hit like a memory. Childhood mornings before the war. He took a sip. It burned his tongue. He didn't care. It was the best thing he'd tasted in years. "You met some of our better pilots today," Mitchell said. "Captain Joe Henderson and Lieutenant Charlie Brennan, 357th Fighter Group. They saw your engine was out, figured you might prefer to live through the day." Franz stared into the coffee, voice barely a whisper. "Why didn't they finish it?" Mitchell looked genuinely confused. "Because you were defenseless. What kind of men do you think we are?" Franz had no answer. Everything he'd been told about American cruelty was being unraveled, sip by sip. The days that followed shattered every expectation. The barracks were basic but warm. Meals were regular. Medical care arrived without question. Even the guards behaved more like watchful neighbors than jailers. One guard, a teenager from Nebraska named Tommy, struck up a conversation. In broken English and German, they exchanged slang, laughed over mispronunciations. For the first time in years, Franz laughed freely. One evening, swing music drifted through the camp. Glenn Miller. Franz found himself tapping his foot. A guard noticed. "You like swing?" Franz nodded. "Before the war, I loved it." The next day, the same guard brought a record player. Benny Goodman, Duke Ellington, Artie Shaw. He set it up in the common room. That night, former enemies sat side by side, heads bobbing in unison. For a few hours, the war felt distant. Music didn't care what flag you flew. 3 weeks after his capture, a familiar face appeared at the barracks door. Captain Joe Henderson, the Mustang pilot who had guided Franz down. He brought soup and cigarettes. "Thought you might be hungry," he said through an interpreter. Franz stood speechless. Henderson smiled. "That was some fine flying. Dead stick landing in a 109 on an unfamiliar runway. I've seen worse from our guys." Henderson pulled a photo from his wallet, a woman and 2 small children. "My wife, Betty. Donna's 5, Joe Jr. just turned 3. Franz nodded. "I have a sister, a mother." Henderson nodded back. "Then they'll be glad to know you made it." Before leaving, Henderson turned serious. "I know what they told you about us, that we're cruel, that we hate. But that's not who we are. You're going to be treated by the rules, and when this war ends, you'll go home." Franz said nothing, but something inside him was shifting. Not just appreciation, understanding, respect. These men didn't act humanely because they were weak. They did it because they were strong enough to choose dignity. That night, Franz wrote in his diary, "They treat us not as monsters, but as men. Today, I saw what honor looks like in a uniform not my own." Franz Stigler's life didn't end on that runway. It restarted. After repatriation in August 1945, he returned to a Germany reduced to rubble. His father was gone, but his mother and sister had survived. Franz trained as a commercial pilot, flying for Lufthansa as Germany rebuilt. But no matter how many miles he flew, Part of him remained at 22,000 feet, suspended between ending and a choice made by an enemy who had every right to finish it, but didn't. For decades, Franz searched for the P-51 pilot who had spared him. He wrote to veterans organizations, sent inquiries across oceans. Finally, in 1989, a letter reached him in Canada where he'd immigrated. The sender, Captain Joe Henderson. They arranged to meet. In an airport terminal, 44 years after that flight, two old men embraced. Enemies once, bonded forever by one moment of decency. "Thank you," Franz whispered. "You gave me my life." Henderson replied simply, "It was the right thing to do." Their friendship endured. They exchanged family photos, visited each other's homes, told their story to schools and veterans groups, not to glorify war but to remind others what humanity looked like when it refused to disappear in the face of cruelty. America's treatment of its prisoners wasn't an accident. It was doctrine. From Eisenhower down, the message was clear. Honor the Geneva Convention, not because others do, but because we do. It wasn't just morality. It was strategy. Every fair gesture planted a seed that grew into alliances, partnerships, and eventually peace. Trust wasn't built in conferences, but in barracks, chow lines, hospital tents, where an American guard handed a cigarette to a German pilot, where a nurse sat with a wounded enemy through the night, where a Mustang pilot saw a gliding aircraft and chose to guide it home. Franz Stigler passed away in 2008, but his story lives on. His grandson became a German Air Force pilot flying NATO missions wing to wing with American pilots, the legacy of a choice made in 1945, a choice to see not an enemy, but a man. A reminder that how you treat the defeated defines the future, and sometimes the truest victories don't come from weapons but from mercy. Not weakness disguised as strength, but strength secure enough to be gentle. Not fear pretending to be courage, but courage confident enough to be kind. Franz learned that at 22,000 feet, waiting for the end. He learned it from two American pilots who saw a man falling and chose to catch him. And he spent the rest of his life making sure that lesson was never forgotten. Because wars are won on battlefields, but peace is built in moments when someone with the power to harm chooses instead to help. Do you have a story where enemies showed unexpected humanity? Share it in the comments. These stories matter. They remind us of what's possible when we refuse to let war make us less than human. If this moved you, hit like and subscribe for more forgotten moments when courage looked like compassion and strength looked like mercy.